Classroom management is one of the biggest concerns for teachers, with a survey finding that over 55% of Australian teachers struggle with this issue. At the same time, it is one of the most studied areas in education. Therefore, for our assessment, we decided to investigate this issue further using the abundance of research available. We split the umbrella topic of classroom management into 4 subtopics, which I will be synthesizing in the next part of the presentation. Ryan will then examine how we collected our data and a summary of the findings. Eden will then discuss an action plan that we created in collaboration with our research. Finally, Serena will examine the ethical considerations and limitations around our action plan. We conducted 4 separate literature reviews, all centered around the central topic of behavioral management in the classroom, with subtopics focusing on student engagement, strategies for behavior management, motivations behind student misbehavior, and whether having a school-wide positive behavior for learning framework affects student behavior in the classroom. There was a common theme that ran between all of the literature reviews. That is that students are much more engaged in their learning and sought to behave appropriately when they felt they shared a good relationship with their teacher. Additionally, lesson content was also found to significantly impact student engagement and behavior. Research has found that students also felt more valued when they thought their teachers cared about their learning and sought to implement interactive, participatory strategies in order to engage and capture their interest. How a teacher handles their interactions with students and misbehavior was also a prevalent factor in continued misbehavior in the classroom. Our research found that if teachers responded aggressively to students not only became more disengaged with their studies, but were also likely to retaliate with further misbehavior. To continue on this, additional research found that when teachers utilize punishment-based strategies, that is, reactive strategies compared to proactive strategies where good behavior is rewarded, it damaged the teacher-student relationship. In Australia in particular, research has shown that parents are concerned with the large usage of exclusionary discipline, becoming the prevalent method for handling misbehaviour across schools in Victoria, New South Wales and Queensland. Therefore, in our literature reviews, we concluded that proactive strategies, where positive behaviours are taught and rewarded, were the best strategies to utilise in the classroom to tackle misbehaviour and encourage student engagement. These strategies were the most successful when implemented in schools that used positive behaviour for learning frameworks. These frameworks help to create a school environment where socially appropriate behaviour is the norm, and research has found that not only did PBLs have a positive impact on student behaviour, it also improved academic outcomes for students. Despite a strong body of research to show the success of school-wide PBLs, implementation of this framework has been inconsistent in Australia. New South Wales alone reported that by 2017, more than 50% of public schools had been trained to use the framework. However, studies have shown that there is a discrepancy between reported usage and actual usage in our school system. In conclusion, it is clear from our literature reviews that despite classroom management being a forefront concern for teachers, it is an issue that can be resolved with the right strategies.
As a group, we followed 2 main approaches to data collection, such as online surveys and interviews. Surveys involve short, open-ended questions as well as numbered scales similar to Likert scales that helped scaling responses from a wide range of participants. The interviews involve gathering more in-depth sources of information involving one-on-one interviews with teaching professionals as well as students. Our findings were then collated and analyzed to identify trends and common themes falling to below 6 categories. The first category was student-teacher relationships. It was a repeated theme that came up in both the surveys and interviews and this was displayed by both the students and teachers. Building rapport leads to better behavior trends. Mutual respect goes a long way. Many teachers and students reported lack of respect can increase misbehavior. The second one theme that appeared was student engagement and motivation. What we found was engagement was highly dependent on their favorite subject. They are likely to be more engaged in their favorite subject and as opposed to their least favorite subject. Students reported more focused approach to subjects when they are more engaged. Students displayed more enthusiasm, and strong technology and sports elements were added to lesson activities. Interesting lesson content was favored by many students for it to be very engaging. Decreased levels of motivation and self-regulation seems to be contributing to classroom misbehaviors. Some of the participating teachers reported setting high expectations of students led to better engagement as well. If students don't see any relevance in what they are learning, they won't be able to engage or feel connected to the unit of work. The next theme that emerged was teaching styles. Calm and assertive teachers seem to have better control, and this was agreed by both students and teachers. Being able to present confidently matters, and this is especially true if you are a casual teacher, making the impressions, and students seem to judge the first few moments with the teacher. Teacher organization and preparedness mattered. When students felt that they receive minimum teaching, such as just handing over worksheets, they tend not to be connected with the lesson. Students reported that they are likely to negatively respond to teachers with demanding things such as demanding respect or yelling could lead to students to retaliate. The next theme emerging was specific teaching strategies. It is important to find a balance between fair and strict. So this was the idea from students. However, majority of the teachers agreed that teachers need to be fair and reasonable, as overly strict controls will lead to misbehavior, and many participants reported that being flexible is important as well. Proactive classroom strategies were favored by majority of the teachers as opposed to reactive classroom management strategies. Lack of clarity regarding expectations and not establishing expectation at the beginning can promote subsequent misbehavior as well. Consistently enforcing schools' positive behavior support system was important. However, one thing we found was that many teachers were unaware of their existing PBS system in their schools, or where the existed PBA was rarely implemented. The fifth one is curriculum content and lesson design. Lack of interest in content or perceived lack of relevance to content led to students to disengage at the classrooms. Students reported boredom when teachers don't deliver lessons in varied ways or lacking differentiated teaching. External factors mattered as well. This was the last category of themes. COVID-19 played a key role, and that disrupted classroom learning and causing classroom management issues. Well-being issues were reported as contributing factors as well, and challenges in the classroom because students may come from broken family backgrounds, issues with various social and economic settings, and teachers reported that they need to take these factors into consideration. Mobile phones were a serious distraction in the classrooms because they presented vibrant multimedia content over paper and pens.
As we have covered, our data unanimously found that students are more motivated to behave well if they have a positive student-teacher relationship, and in particular, if 1. Teachers cared about students enough to get to know them, 2. Teachers made an effort to make lessons more interesting, and 3. Positive reinforcement is prioritized over negative reinforcement. From these key findings, we developed a 3-part intervention that focuses on positive reinforcement and proactive, rather than reactive, classroom management. We aim to determine if student behavior will improve when students 1. Can tell teachers care about their learning, 2. Feel like they have a voice, and 3. Find the learning interesting and rewarding. We will conduct our study in a Department of Education school in Western Sydney with an X-year value between 900 and 950. This study will take place in one Year 8 English class consisting of 28 students with 15 boys and 13 girls. This class was selected because it presented a higher number of negative central incidents for misbehavior in comparison to other Stage 4 classes. This data was extracted prior to the commencement of the intervention. The study will take place over the course of one term, specifically Term 3, in order not to intersect with formal examinations. The 3-part intervention will be implemented as follows. On day 1, the teacher will introduce activity slips to students, which are designed to give students a voice in their learning. These will be handed to students at the beginning of the first lesson of each week. On their slip, students must write one type of activity they would like to see implemented in their learning during that week. These slips will then enter a drawer, be mixed up, and the teacher will then select one slip. The teacher will ensure that chosen activity is then integrated into a lesson during the week. The teacher will then inform students that 3 positive phone calls will be consistently made for the best behaved students at the end of each school week. After making these calls, the teacher will record these calls on Central as positive incident reports. The teacher will then inform students that if they behave well consistently and complete their work as required, they will be granted a reward period at the end of every 3-week cycle. This is an entire period rewarded to students during which they can engage in fun activities. The nature of the reward period can vary depending on the class or school. However, for the purposes of our project, this reward period will take the form of a games period, with activities related to the class content. One of the rewards period will incorporate an outdoors practical activity to engage the students physically. The teacher will explicitly inform students that this reward period will operate on a 3-strike system. If students misbehave and are given 3 strikes on the board before the end of the 3-week cycle, the reward period will be revoked and students will need to wait until the next cycle. Our intervention will have a mixed methods design. Data will be collected via 4 methods. 2 will be implemented throughout the intervention, and the other 2 will be implemented post-intervention. Firstly, at the end of each week, exit surveys in the form of the Likert questionnaire will be handed out to students to complete. Questions will focus on students' interest and engagement in the classroom activities, their attitude and relationship towards their teacher, and their inclination to misbehave. This Likert questionnaire will be administered physically at the end of the last lesson of the week, and students will be given 10 minutes to complete and return the survey. For the first 10 minutes of each lesson following the reward period, an informal class interview will be conducted by the classroom teacher to ascertain students' attitudes towards the reward period, and whether that enhanced their motivations to behave. These kinds of inquiry-based conversations with students during class are a method advocated for by Dana and Yendel Hoppe, 2014. A third-party teacher researcher will make observational notes of students' responses and behaviours during this interview. Data regarding the number of misbehaviour-related central incidents for every student in the class will be gathered on the final day of the intervention. This data will be compared with the data extracted at the beginning of the intervention to determine if there has been a reduction in the number of negative central incidents in Term 3 compared to Term 2. After the intervention, 6 students will participate in a focus group with an independent teacher researcher in which they further share their feelings towards the intervention. This includes whether they feel closer with their teacher, whether they feel class has become more engaging, and whether they feel more motivated to behave well. The selected participants will be students who evidence the greatest change in behaviour or attitude throughout the intervention, based on the data collected from the surveys and central entries. If the intervention proves to be successful, there is potential for this action research project to be implemented on a school-wide basis as a school-wide proactive classroom management strategy. This could potentially be integrated into the school's PBL framework.
In the implementation of the intervention, our action research plan had some limitations despite its strengths. The ethical considerations applied within our action research plan were of informed consent. As our sample size are of a Year 8 class, informed consent is required in order to carry out the intervention to take place, as if the participants are of underage and would be needing their parents' permission. If students' consent forms are not returned, the process of the action research plan would be unable to proceed. It is until consent forms are signed and returned that the research and the implementation of the intervention can officially begin. Additionally, having only one class from one secondary school as a sample size to generalize the impact of student-teacher relationships would be difficult for the research in identifying significant impacts that may have occurred and to draw on consistent patterns within the action plan. In order to have a more precise result, a larger sample size would be needed. Likewise, the limitation of reliability would be tested for students' responses on their weekly Google Likert and exit surveys. Students within the responses may potentially be dishonest and may even do a docu-vote instead of a genuine response. Students' responses may not provide enough detail and could repeat previous answers made. Collecting survey responses can also be resource and time-consuming upon the classroom teacher. Furthermore, the workload of the Action Research Plan may even overwhelm the classroom teacher due to the weekly monitoring of student surveys and activity slips, actively doing positive phone calls to home weekly, and logging in daily central entries. There is an administrative demand on the teacher and in effect may cause some inconsistencies involuntarily. It may be suggested that an additional support staff member during the intervention period would be needed. However, in having an additional support staff member, students may behave differently and not authentically as they would with just their regular classroom teacher on a daily basis. Moreover, in implementing the intervention of a free period with a reward party every 3 weeks consumes a huge portion of curriculum time and may have negative impacts on students' grades. Students may potentially even be indifferent to this reward party and may even refuse to participate. Overall, to efficiently evaluate student-teacher relationships, it would be most ideal to carry out the Action Research Plan for a whole year instead of one term, as it is not enough time for change or developments to occur and to detect any significant patterns made. The implementation of the intervention needs to be repeatedly examined and observed to identify any change and developments in the characteristics of the sample study, to establish sequence of events, and allow insight into the cause and effect on student-teacher relationships relating to misbehavior. Essentially, this can only be carried out in a period of time longer than one term to receive precise results, in gaining more data and knowledge, and in order to draw a valid conclusion on student-teacher relationships based on misbehavior. That concludes our group presentation. Thank you for watching, and here are our references.